Joining me in the studio now, one of the most important men in South African football. This is an interview that I've been excited about for quite some time. I'd like to welcome the chairman of the Premier Soccer League, Dr. Irvin Khoza, live in studio. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming out and thank you for making your debut on Newsroom Africa Channel 405.
Well, thank you very much also to be part of this new aesthetic, beautiful, setup, nice colors. Giving us hope, of freshness, in the industry. I'm happy to be here.
We've been telling a lot of PSL stories over the last few weeks, and this is just going to be the latest link in, hopefully, an ongoing relationship between us and the league and football in South Africa. You are always a very busy man, but you have been particularly busy this week, obviously being, out at the ICASA hearings. For those that were not aware as to what was taking place in ICASA, you obviously had quite a few strong words to say. Remind us of your position with regards to the proposed ICASA regulations and why you feel it will damage the league.
As much as the matter is sub judice, but it's important to indicate that what was of concern to us on the draft regulation is that, if you look, benchmarking, what's happening internationally, no league, is listed. Now, our own regulation talks about sports of national interest or national sports of interest, and the PSL is not a national team sport of interest. It's a club, clubs, and it's a league, which, are not falling, under the category of national teams. So we've made that point, to the ICASA to say, I think there must be research done to indicate whether, it was a proper what's called, classification of the PSL to be listed. Popularity does not make you a national interest. Popularity, is popularity because of the game is popular, not because of its national interest. So that's why we try to make that distinction, which I think, it seems to be persuaded. But depending on how they evaluate it in terms of their own regulation, because their own regulation is clear about, which sport must be regulated for free to air, to be exclusive to free to air, mostly at national teams. So the league, is not in that category, and that is why all over the world, in all the leagues of the world, for good reasons why, the leagues are not listed as part of national interest.
You mentioned a lovely line, or at least a lovely line was mentioned during that hearing where it was spoken about, soccer in South Africa, football in South Africa is not just a sport, it's a social entity. And what does that really mean for South African football fans, that you describe it as a social entity and not just something we do on the weekends?
Well, I think, it's because when you talk about public interest, you don't only talk about, people watching television. When you talk about public interest, you talk about the players, you talk about families, you talk about the club owners, you talk about, the informal, economy. All those people are impacted, by this public interest. But more importantly, it's very important that when you talk about, football, it's not only sport, it's content. We are content generators. If ever you've got content, like whether you call it Uzalo, you call it, Mbeu, you call it, generation, you spend money, to make, that content, to be appealing. So therefore, if you say that, other content must be regulated, then there's the problem, the challenge. But for us, the concern is that, why football, the leagues are not, listed, is because who can spend 200 million rands on a player? If ever it's not on broadcast money, all the teams cannot spend from their pockets to make that, content appealing. You've got the money got to come somewhere because you're spending money to develop that content and also to refresh it all the time. You must see the conditions that we have put on the clubs in terms of making it appealing continuously, because we're in the global village. Now, PSL is the only league in the continent that is #1 compared to leagues in Europe, whether it's EPL, whether it's La Liga, whether it's Sirsa, is #1 because of the effort and the investment put by all other stakeholders that are involved, in the sport or football, in the league side. So that's why for us, we feel it's very important that, football, as much as it's a sport, but it's content, like any other content that is generated by the content owners.
Because of time constraints, I do want to move the conversation along. A lot of people have just finished watching the NFD playoff promotion matches, and a lot of the chatter that I've often seen take place around this time is how and why would it be so difficult to make the PSL into 18 teams? Some people don't find the promotion playoff system quite fair, whereby the outgoing PSL team can arguably win 5 matches all season, win the playoff promotion and remain in the top flight. Is there ever a discussion where we can potentially change that?
I think it's very important people to take that discussion into context. No league in the continent is guaranteed a grant. This was an innovation that was done by a few of us who felt that there are only 2 teams that were marketable at the time. And other teams were not getting sponsors. So how do you make our league exciting and predictable? Because if you talk about 18 teams, so you must cut that grant into 18. Now you can imagine the very same 16 teams, how they're going to complain. But more importantly, the geographical spread is wide, we understand, but it's got enough money to be able to sustain those 18 teams. And the flying itself, the expenses in flying and traveling by air to cover the expenses is not there. So for us, it is important that we are financing the first division. And it doesn't happen that when you're in business in competition, you finance your own competition. So the national first division is sponsored by the income that comes from the Premier Division teams. So is it normal? It's not normal. But because we understood that we need quality teams coming to the Premier League because of the content and the positioning of the league being appealing to the broadcasters, appealing to the advertisers, therefore it's important to invest with that kind of understanding. But it's not supposed to be like that. Whoever comes into football must come with his own deep pockets to finance his team, not because of the grant. There's no rule in the league that when you come to the league, you must get a grant. But it's out of our own communalistic spirit that we felt is important to empower the people, especially those self-made people who make football what it is today, to say how do we assist them. They've gone this far, they cannot go beyond this point. So therefore it was very important in 1996 when we changed from the NSL, we now said PSL, so that we are coming with a new kind of appealing league which is going to be attractive to the sponsors.
Mr. Chairman, strong teams with strong history make for a strong league. And of recent seasons, Kaizer Chiefs have struggled, and there's no denying that they are seen as a super club in South Africa, a super club on the continent. Is their form worrying for the league, that it may dilute the success? Often you take a look at big teams around the world, and some might say if they don't come to the party, maybe some interest gets lost. Is that a case in South Africa?
No. When we repositioned the PSL in 1996, we said we want a league that is unpredictable. We're one of the 2 leagues in the world that is unpredictable. Is the PSL in South Africa and the EPL in the UK, no other league. You go to Spain, it's 2-horse race. You go to Germany, it's 2-horse race, not in South Africa. So it was important to do that so that you must have a product. It should not be anchored on the 2 teams only or 1 team. It must be any other team is good enough to win the Premier League, but also you must earn your position. You cannot try today's Washington with yesterday's sun. It's very important forever to refresh yourself. All of us, the Pirates was out of the top 8 at some point in time. It's good for the game, so people must not be complacent. But when they come in there, they must know that they must up the game, because everybody is upping the game, because now all the teams are now exposed to scientific support, which was never there before. So therefore it was a preserve of the top teams to get all the talent coming to those teams working in. It's not like that anymore. Teams are keeping their players, they're providing scientific support, hence the league is competitive, which is good for the industry, and it's good for the business to make sure that our league is competitive. It's
often been described that the PSL is the most professional league in the continent. Do you feel that we still are the most professional league in the continent?
We've just come back 2 weeks ago from a CAF workshop in Uganda. And the CAF was emphasizing in all the clubs, or in all the associations, to say at least 4 teams must comply with the club licensing. They were surprised that for the last 2 years, all PSL 32 teams are certificated, are licensed. It doesn't happen. Even our licensing conditions are at the same level, with what you get in UEFA, which is the first of its kind. In fact, CAF is using the content from the PSL as a benchmark to assist other countries, to adapt to the club licensing requirements that we have put forward. Because if we are saying we're the best league, hence I said to you, we're the only league that is #1 ahead of the European leagues, because we have learned to make sure that if you want to be competitive, it's not by emotion, it's not by entitlement, it's what product you present, so that even the sponsors are able to pay the top dollar, because your content is competing with other content that is available in the market, because of the democratization of content, which is so much, and the shrinkage of media space. Therefore, you must be relevant for the broadcaster to be able to buy your content.
In a recent package that we put together here on Newsroom Africa, we caught up with the director of football at SAFA, Mr. Neil Tovey, who was quite critical of some of the clubs in the PSL, suggesting that they haven't done enough to develop young players, and instead a lot of that development falls onto the shoulders of SAFA and the national team by the time the players get there. Do you feel that enough is being done by the clubs to hand them over at national duty?
I think it's very important that you put things into perspective. we don't do selections of the national teams, but what we've done as a PSL, as a condition of club licensing, each team is required to have 2 developmental teams. Hence, because there's no game time, football is not like boxing, where you do shadow boxing with no target, to test your shots. So what we have done at the PSL, we've developed what is called the Diski Challenge, the under 23, which last week we've just announced that it's going to be 2 now first. Yes. So which I guess, football is all about how many times you touch the ball. So we felt that it's very important that instead of making 1 round, we must make it 2 rounds. And the players that come out of that, program, we've got 150 of them that are in the PSL top teams because we've given confidence to the coaches. In South Africa, there was a perception that when you are young, you must be 26, 27 years old. They didn't have the confidence of playing players under 19, under 20, like you see in the Ajax Amsterdam. So we gave that confidence now to the World Cup. But it's for the coaches to select. If they don't extend their search beyond the academies, beyond their structures into the academies, it's a problem because most of the players that play in the PSL now are players that are under 23. We are coming from that initiative. We've been incepted with, everybody was against it, but now everybody is embracing it as a progressive step. It's one of its kind in the world, where we've got the reserves league under 23. We've got 2 rounds and a competition of a knockout. So it's a step in the right direction. I think we've got enough material for the national team coaches to extend their search when they want talent.
Could that money, that focus, that attention that's going into the Diski Challenge be put to better use in the NFD? Some might suggest that as a national first division, we don't see enough of it.
It's wrong. We don't guarantee you to come to the PSL and pay for you. You must pay for yourself. Now, we went out of the way to go and look for a group, a league, that's going to assist in bringing new talent. Now, football is about entertainment. Football is about content that is appealing. Now, if you don't bring exciting players every time, right now we are from the Windows cycle of buying and selling. There's nothing revealing, there's nothing new, nothing exciting. We felt it's very important that those players that are from the under 23 division, when they come in, it must be newsworthy. And that's why now we make sure that even players that are coming from areas where there are no football, but the communities in that area are going to support that player because it's one of their kind. So the excitement starts developing. We're maintaining that market for ourselves. So it's very important that we strengthen the reserve league to make sure that there's more players coming into the conveyor belt. If we don't do that, the league is going to be ordinary league like any other leagues in the continent.
Safety in stadiums has always been a big discussion, a big talking point in South Africa, and we sadly have a few incidents that are a real black mark on South Africa's history books. And if and when there are really big clashes, we do see huge numbers coming to the stadiums, which is outstanding to have. But of course, that raises the security concern. As the league, are we still keeping a very strong eye on ensuring that safety is of the utmost importance for fans?
Fortunately for us, after the Ellis Park disaster, there was a Sasria Act which was instituted in 2010 for the World Cup, which is applicable now. Every game is categorized, whether it's low risk, medium risk, high risk. If it's medium risk, now that's what is interesting, that it costs the club plus minus 300,000 rand to comply with that requirement if your game is categorized as medium risk. If it's high risk, you spend up to 500,000 rand before you get into other expenses of staging a game. So that's where the challenge is from the clubs. If you don't have the crowd, where do you get that kind of money? So every club understands that if ever you are medium risk, then the police are in charge of that game. The VOC commander, it becomes a captain or lieutenant in the police who's the command and control of that event itself. And if anything is not compliant, that game can never start. So it's important that the public understand that if games are categorized, but if it's a low-risk game, the responsibility comes to the club, who must make sure that it complies with the minimum requirements in the PSL compliance manual. So we are so strict in terms of compliance. The compliance manual, the club licensing requirement, but also the SASRIAS Act, which is statutory in terms of the law. So it's very important that if you don't comply with that, you go to jail.
Ticket prices for PSL matches have always been incredibly reasonable for South African football fans, yet sometimes we still don't see, outside of big derbies, big numbers going through to stadiums. How do we improve the viewing experience? Because some would argue that it's not about the cost, because at arguably 40 Rand a ticket, that shouldn't be seen as out of reach for any fan, yet some might argue that it's the experience that is lacking. How do we improve that to ensure that fans enjoy the experience, come through and pay their tickets to try and put more numbers in stadiums?
We hear our own enemies. Now, if you look at the PSL, you look at the continent, you look at the world, we're one of the few countries in the world where you've got so many sporting hours real time. And now, so people now, they're selective. Because now what is happening, people have got a team in the EPL, they've got a team in the Series A, they've got a team in La Liga. The guy sitting in the comfort of his house, so why must I leave my house? Because they are betting now. They're playing e-games. They want to select their players. They must be updated, but what's happening internationally about their selection. So the game is becoming now an armchair kind of entertainment. So, and that is why, the challenge we have in South Africa is that, unfortunately, like when you see the people in the UK, in the Bundesliga in Germany, is the 60% of those people are people that come from the neighborhood, walking to the stadium. Because of migration, urbanization, a lot of people have been displaced. So now there's new trends are coming up now with also the influence of the social media, which makes people have their own kind of programming, unlike before. And that is why you find that the league, the derby, becomes a fashion statement that is one of its kind, that everybody, if it's happening in South Africa, must go to the derby. We try to debunk that myth, but unfortunately, people have got choices they make now. Because unlike in the olden days, if people in the community used to go to the stadium, all of them, for that particular game, come back home. There was no television, there was no other entertainment. There's so much spoiled for choice in terms of television. When you go now, everything is live. So therefore, some people, they don't even go to church. When they go to church, they go with their phones to watch the games on television, which has never happened before. And then they switch from that game in the PSL, they go to the EPL. From the EPL, they go to Series A. So it's a big challenge for all of us.
I know it doesn't necessarily involve the PSL, but you're a football man of many years' experience. So I'd like to get your opinion on what took place in the CAF Champions League final. I hope you were able to catch it yesterday. There was a terrible scenario whereby the matches eventually stopped and there was risks of walk-offs and walk-outs and VAR not working, etc. A lot of the reaction to that was African football again. How do we change that perception? How do we change people's views on the fact that African football continuously seems to be under this cloud?
Well, I'm not sure what happened because I'm a member of the inter-club committee of CAF. Now, I was made to understand was VAR. What happened to the VAR is somebody's guess. If there was a technical glitch which is natural, then let's accept. But if it was a handmade, kind of a glitch, then it's a challenge. So I can't explain because, fortunately, there was not going to be a human element that could be considered for whatever the outcome was. But there was a glitch on the VAR. What was the cause? It's a speculation. So it's for us to understand what happened with that glitch. Because all over the world, in the World Cup in Russia, you saw what happened. Manchester City, what happened. They were kicked out of a competition because of the VAR, pronouncement. So here there was a VAR, so there was no human element. So I can't speculate on as to actually what happened. Is a human element or perhaps is a technical glitch that is natural? It's another discussion for another day.
Can we be confident that matches played under the CAF label, though, are free and fair and open to the best team winning every match?
It must prick the conscience of the administrators because what has made PSL successful is to make sure that the integrity of the fixture is sacrosanct. There must be consistency in the fixture, there must be reliability on the fixture. Hence, everybody can plan and everybody can have confidence in investing in that product. If you don't create that kind of equity, nobody can put money in that kind of a property. So it's the challenge that they must deal with it if ever they've not come across that kind of requirements, that if ever your league must be compelling. Now, why do you think South Africa is number one? It's because even the betting agencies, they've just given a report that they now trust, that take bets on South African fixtures because they know that the integrity is beyond reproach, which I think is a very important plus because we don't compromise on the integrity of the fixture to make sure that everybody is up to scrutiny.
As a South African, as a football administrator, as a human being, what are you hoping for from Banyana Banyana, Bafana Bafana, FIFA World Cup, AFCON just around the corner?
I think we must give them compliment, for having tried for so many years, for them to represent the country, and all hoping that when the team goes to the World Cup, there must be enough coverage in South Africa. I don't see enough coverage in South Africa to give with the momentum, to cooperate, to energize them, to sponsor the Banyana leagues in South Africa, because if for them to be strong, it's not only to having a Premier League Banyana in South Africa, you must have leagues in the regions where now development starts, where the excitement starts in the grassroots level. So it's very important that we energize the corporate people to be able to see the need to support Sasol, who's been a very special sponsor for all these years, to have confidence in Banyana until they go to the World Cup. Here is a breakthrough for us now to take it up because 58%, 60% of the population in this country is women. So therefore, it's very important if ever we encourage them to be involved. You can imagine the spin-off, because you come to your house, you've got no choice. They set the tone. They set the excitement. You are in control, but they are the neck controlling the head. So it's very important that football becomes predisposed to them. They must embrace it, like what happened in America. It's catching up because women's football is successful more than the men's football. So that's why for us, here's a plus for us, for Bayern to go to the World Cup, to say the sponsors must put in money in the regions to develop football, so that they must have the same Premier League that we have as the men's Premier League.
Mr. Chairman, I know your time is precious, and I thank you for making yourself available tonight. And I also hope that in future more robust conversations can happen between the league and media around South Africa. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy man and you need to go. So thank you, and best of luck for the upcoming league. I have no doubt that there's loads of meetings, loads of work, and loads of preparation. We'd love to have you back in and chat in the future. I'm
feeling honored to be invited in such beautiful studios. I think people, if they come here, they realize that you mean business. I think, you know, your station must be supported, because the aesthetics, it shows also the quality of the presenters, which I've been looking, is quite competitive and exciting. It's a breath of fresh air. Good luck going to the future. No.